Hello BookTube. Today I'm going to be doing the Writers Are Weird tag. The tag was created by Elliot Brooke, who's a fantastic booktuber and author tuber, and I was tagged by Steve Donahue, who is Steve Donahue. And I'll be leaving links to both of their videos down below. So let's begin. Question number 1. Do you have bizarre internet searches? And if so, what's the weirdest? I prefer books. I prefer to do my research through books. I tend to trust them significantly more than I do random stuff on the internet. But I have used the internet for a few searches. Namely, I've done some research on local urban legends and mysterious happenings here in Waco. So one of the weirdest ones was there's a bit of property that is adjacent to Cameron Park in Waco. That it's a ruined house. That pretty much all that's left is bits of foundation that has become reimagined as the witch's castle, and that it's supposedly haunted by a malevolent witch. And all sorts of legend tripping stuff goes on there. Yeah, but and also expanding it into Cameron Park. Apparently, I'm not entirely sure which Cameron Park witch actually owned that house, because there's like 4 or 5 Cameron Park witches. So it's like, ooh. Waco is really, really bizarrely haunted across the city. And McLennan County, there's a book I read a few years ago that looked at all of the urban legends, all of the hauntings and stuff in McLennan County. And it is quite a number. Quite a number. Also, I've done some internet searches on witchcraft and sorcery. As a fantasy writer, magic and magic systems are one of my main areas of interest, and I really want to try to ground the magic systems I create in a more, maybe not necessarily realistic system, but one that is more inspired by historical precedent. So what magical systems actually developed here on Earth, although clearly not real. I mean, magic's not real, but the magic systems that have been invented here on Earth and people have actually performed, compared to like the more simplistic and overly artificial that seem to be more popular, thanks to the Brandon Sanderson and his devotees. Anyway, question number 2. Do you write people you know and dislike into your story as villains or dumb people to kill off? No, I don't. There's always the temptation to, but I've never really given it much thought of writing people I dislike as negative characters. I mean, of course, I will draw on my life experiences in certain aspects of my fiction in one shape or another, but it's never to get a vicarious revenge for wrongs, real or imagined. Question number 3. Does personal hygiene sometimes come second to writing? No. I mean, I always try to maintain my usual hygiene standards, which is not that difficult to do. I mean, now Steve seems to, in his video, kind of use this sort of question as sort of the muse has taken over the writer and there's just this mad sprint of creative endeavor, but it could also be very much, generally speaking, hygiene's not very important to said writer or in general. So, but no, I maintain my hygiene standards. Question number 4. Do you go on baby name websites to help you name your characters? Uh, Not generally. If I'm looking to create characters who are not American, I will go to Behind the Name. There's like two parts of this site. One is like first names and then one is surnames. And I will usually, if I'm wanting to create a non-American character or if I'm wanting a particularly symbolic name for the character. So like right now there's in my superhero story, there's a Russian character. And so I went to Behind the Name surname and site and looked up Russian surnames, found one that sounded interesting, and yeah, I used it. But otherwise, as far as like Earth set, or if I'm using more real names for characters, I'll either use Behind the Name or I can just create them myself. Now, if it's secondary world fantasy, I pretty much make them up whole cloth. Because obviously, yeah, there's not a whole lot of, yeah, you can't really find, like, say, a Karja or Zazaril elsewhere except for in my head. Question number 5. Do you have a list of actors and actresses that would play your characters if there was an adaptation made? No. Now, I could say, like, so going back to Akarja, that I see, say, Dante Scott or Mark Indelicato playing him, but no, I don't actually cast my stories with the intent of future adaptation. What I do is I model the character. So, say I would, when I'm imagining the character, I might use Dante Scott or Mark Indelicato or someone else as sort of like a visual model that I can kind of draw inspiration from, which is sort of maybe a bit more appropriate for, say, a more comic book writer or artist who would draw inspiration from actors and actresses and real people in how they model their characters. But I don't cast my characters. Although that said, I have described my writing process because sometimes characters do shift projects. A character called Honor Gale has been in about every realistic or Earth set story I wanted to write. So in certain sense, it's like my head is, or my creativity is a bit of a studio itself. But otherwise, I don't actively like plan for adaptations or fan casting those characters. Question number 6. Have you ever stared at a stranger because they look like one of your characters? No. Now, I might want to use them as inspiration for a character, or I might draw inspiration from them, but never really saying, "Oh, that's my character." Largely because I write fantasy, so unless we have some Once Upon a Time shenanigans going on, yeah, I'm never going to see a dead ringer for Akarjur, Sazeril, or anyone else. Number 7. Do you talk to yourself to help you work through scenes? If so, where do you talk to yourself? No, I talk to myself all the time. I work on. I talk myself through my writing, what problems I'm having, what ideas. I try to remember to write them down because otherwise I'll end up forgetting, and then it kind of defeats the purpose. And then I talk about other things too. Um, but so yeah, so the last time I was like last night. So I'm working on a project right now for July. It's not exactly Camp NaNoWriMo. I didn't know about it until like Wednesday, but I wanted to uh, do have another go at writing Akarsha the Sorcerer, and in writing the story, I really wasn't happy with what I'd gotten these past few days. So I'm thinking, well, maybe I should reimagine the story or rework it in a different perspective. And so I'm kind of like, yeah, I think I might try that when I get next chance I get to write. So I mean, I do talk to myself and do work through whatever creative challenges I have. Question number 8. While writing, do you make the expressions your characters are making? No, I don't. Usually, I have the look of intensity when I'm writing. Um, Number 9. Do you ever practice entering interview questions in case you make it big? No, I don't. I'm a bit of a, yeah. Like Steve, I think I'm a bit of a gas bag. So, number 10. Do you have a soundtrack and or playlist for your book or scenes from your book? Yeah, there's, I think, two ways to interpret this question. One is, do you have like a soundtrack or a playlist that you are using to when you write the story? Uh, when you sort of you're writing and it sort of acts as a inspiration, sort of setting the mood, and may or may not become a crutch. Or is it more of a sort of the project is completed, the story's done, and you're creating the playlist after the fact of what songs do you think really set the mood? Sort of like maybe the score of a film or something. And for both questions, for the later interpretation, the soundtrack as a soundtrack, as a sort of accompaniment to the story, I don't do that. As a sort of in the moment of creation, I sometimes listen to music when I write. I mostly listen to long or watch, well, technically it would be listening to long videos on YouTube. It could be something like bookish, politics and prose. WGBH has a thing. Convention panels, scientific stuff, lectures, that sort of thing. I'll have that on as the background as I'm writing, but I don't really make a concerted playlist one way or the other. So that wraps up the the writers are weird tag. Sometimes I forget I had speech therapy when I was a kid. Or sometimes the need for speech therapy comes through. Anyway, so that was the writers are weird tag. And if you are a writer and you haven't been tagged, please do consider yourselves tagged. And I will see you in a few hours with weekly reads. And perhaps maybe a rant or two. Oh Lord, the world is, yes. It is nasty. Anyway, so until my next video, please have a great day and stay safe. Thank you, BookTube and AuthorTube.